My fiancée mocked my stutter in front of her bridesmaids, so I sent her a video message ending the wedding and turned off my phone forever. I'm a 28-year-old guy, and I've stuttered for as long as I can remember. It started when I was 5, after a traumatic hospital visit, and it never really went away. I used to hate my voice. Every pause, every stuck syllable felt like a spotlight on everything I wasn't. People would either rush to finish my sentences, avoid eye contact, or worse, pretend they didn't hear me. So I got quiet, safer that way. And then I met Lauren. It was at a fundraiser for a mutual friend's cancer treatment. Loud music, plastic wine glasses, and that awkward mingling vibe. I was standing near the back, sipping soda, when she walked up and said, "You look like you're either bored or brilliant." I choked on my drink, but she didn't flinch when I stuttered a reply. She waited, patiently, and smiled. Then she said, "Take your time. I actually want to hear what you have to say." That night, we talked for over an hour. Well, she talked, and I managed to get in enough between the gaps. She said I had a calmness to me that I made her feel grounded. She told me she dated loud, fast-talking men before. Men who never paused to breathe, let alone listen. "You're different," she said, touching my hand. In a good way. I didn't realize then how loaded that word, different, would become. Back then, it felt like love, or at least acceptance, and for someone like me, that felt like a miracle. She never laughed when I got stuck, never interrupted. She even learned to tap my knee once when I was spiraling, just enough to calm me, never enough to shame me. I thought I'd found someone who saw me, not just my speech, but now, looking back, maybe she loved me for my quiet, not for who I was, but because I didn't steal her spotlight. About 2 months into dating, Lauren invited me to meet her closest friends, her bridesmaids-to-be, though I didn't know that yet. It was a Sunday brunch kind of crowd, loud, manicured, always mid-laugh about someone else, the kind of women who say, "No offense," right before saying the most offensive thing you've ever heard. I was nervous, obviously. I always am, in new groups. But Lauren squeezed my hand and whispered, "They'll love you. Just be yourself." I should have known then. Being myself wasn't ever going to be enough. We met at a trendy cafe downtown with reclaimed wood tables and walls plastered in neon affirmations like, "You got this?" I barely got past, "Hi, I'm L.L. Lucas," before one of them, Caitlin, I think, snorted and said, "Ah, he's shy." Lauren laughed. Just once, quick and tight, like it slipped out before she could catch it. She looked at me after, mouthed sorry, then changed the subject before I could respond. It wasn't the laugh that stung. It was the way she didn't say anything to them, like it was easier to let them joke than defend me. Later that day, when we got back to her apartment, I finally asked, "Do they always talk like that?" She curled up on the couch next to me and said, "They're just a lot sometimes. They didn't mean anything by it." Then she kissed me, and I let it slide, because I wanted to believe her, because I wanted this, us, to work. But somewhere in my gut, something shifted, like the floor beneath me had moved a few inches, and I told myself it was nothing. Except it wasn't nothing, it was the first crack, and I didn't even see the fault line until it was too late. It happened on a cold December night, under the willow tree where we'd shared our first real kiss. I'd spent weeks planning it. Got the ring resized 3 times, rehearsed my speech until my voice gave out, even arranged for a friend to hide nearby with a camera. Lauren arrived in this burgundy coat she loved, and when I dropped to one knee, her hands flew to her face like we were in a rom-com. I stuttered through the words, will you marry me?" but I got them out. And she said yes, laughed and cried, and threw her arms around me like she'd been waiting her whole life for this exact moment. It should have felt like the happiest day of mine. Instead, something felt off. Not with her reaction. She played the part perfectly. It was later when she posted the photo on Instagram with the caption, "I said yes to the kindest, most patient man I've ever met. He waited for me, and I'm so glad he did." The comments came fast. "Aw, he's like a gentle teddy bear. He looks like he'd never raise his voice. You can tell he's so sweet and soft-spoken." And all I could think was, that's it? No one said anything about me being funny, or smart, or even attractive. Just patient. Just quiet. That night, I scrolled through every photo of us she'd ever posted. The captions were always about how I made her feel. Grounded, safe, calm. Never about who I actually was. It was like I was some emotional therapy dog in human form. Useful, comforting, but replaceable. I went to bed that night with her curled against my chest, ring on her finger. And for the first time, I felt like I wasn't proposing to someone who loved me, but someone who loved the way I didn't take up too much space. If the proposal was a dream, wedding planning was a rude awakening. Lauren transformed almost overnight. From the warm, listening partner I knew to someone I barely recognized. Every detail had to be her way, and if I offered an opinion, it was either ignored or turned into a joke. "Let the expert handle it," she'd say in front of the florist or caterer, flashing a smile like I was her adorable but clueless sidekick. It was subtle at first, light teasing, tiny dismissals, but it started to wear me down in ways I couldn't name yet. Because when you've spent your life with a voice people talk over, you start to question whether speaking up is even worth it. One afternoon, I tried suggesting a different venue, something simpler, more us. Lauren didn't even look up from her laptop. "Lucas, you barely speak at these meetings," she said. "Now you want to change everything?" I swallowed hard, trying to explain. But the moment I stuttered on the venue, she rolled her eyes, and said, "Just email me your ideas later, okay?" Her mom chimed in, too, one evening while we were discussing the ceremony. She looked at me and said, "Maybe Lauren should do the vows. Yours might take too long, sweetie." Sweetie. Like I was a child, a charity case. Lauren didn't correct her. She just laughed along. It was the first time in years I wanted to crawl inside myself and disappear. I thought this was supposed to be our wedding, but it felt more like I'd been cast as the silent groom in a show called The Lauren Experience. And maybe the worst part was, I let it happen. Because somewhere in my head, I was still hoping she'd come back to the version of her I first met. I hadn't seen my speech therapist in nearly a year, but something in me cracked after that conversation with her mom. I sat in my car outside their house, engine off, hands gripping the steering wheel like it was the only thing keeping me from falling apart. The next morning, I emailed my old therapist and asked if she had room. She replied within the hour. "Of course, let's talk soon," she wrote. So I did. We met over Zoom. Dr. Patel, kind eyes, slow cadence, the kind of presence that made silence feel safe. I told her I was getting married, and she smiled. But when I described how I'd been feeling, smaller, quieter, like I was disappearing in my own life, her smile faded. She asked one question. "Does she make space for your voice, Lucas?" I stared at the screen for what felt like a full minute. I think I even shook my head before I could say the words out loud. "No," I finally whispered, "not anymore." That session opened a floodgate. I talked about the wedding, the comments, the way Lauren's friends treated me like a lovable accessory. I told her about the proposal photo, the caption, the way it all felt like branding. Like I wasn't a partner, I was a prop that made her look more grounded, more deep. Dr. Patel said something that gutted me. Sometimes people love what you represent, not who you are, and they'll keep you quiet because your silence benefits them. I sat there stunned, because deep down I already knew. I just didn't want it to be true. That night I pulled out a notebook and wrote across the first page, "Red flags I don't want to admit." And I didn't stop writing until the ink ran dry. It was supposed to be a quick errand. Lauren had forgotten her phone at the bridal boutique, and she asked if I could drop by and grab it while she finished up the final dress rehearsal. I figured I'd surprise her instead. Maybe see her in the dress, tell her how beautiful she looked, remind myself what all this stress was for. When I pulled up, the boutique lights were still on. The door cracked open. I heard laughter echoing from the fitting room. Then I heard my name. So I paused. "You sure you want to marry someone who can't even say 'I do' without buffering?" A voice snorted. Laughter exploded. Then another one, Taylor maybe, mimicked a slow, stuttered version of the vows. Lou, love you," followed by mock crying, and then Lauren, my fiancée. She giggled and said, Stop, you're terrible." But her voice was bright, light, like she wasn't mad at all, like she didn't want them to stop. My heart started pounding. I felt hot and cold at the same time, like my whole body was rejecting the moment. I didn't move, didn't speak. Just stood there, paralyzed in the hallway with my hands clenched so tight they hurt. I didn't walk in. I didn't confront her. I turned around, left the boutique, and sat in my car with the engine running and my chest shaking. All those nights she told me my voice was beautiful in its own way. All those moments she claimed I made her feel safe. Turns out, I was only ever safe when she needed a story. But behind closed doors, when it was just her and the girls, I was a joke with a speech pattern, and she didn't even bother to defend me. I don't remember turning the key. I don't remember pulling away from the boutique. All I know is, 1 second I was standing in that hallway, and the next I was parked 2 blocks down with my hands gripping the steering wheel like it was the only thing anchoring me to the earth. I couldn't breathe right. My chest was doing this tight, stuttering rhythm that didn't match anything else in the world around me. I stared at the dashboard clock, watching minutes pass like hours, and I couldn't stop hearing her laugh. Not just the sound of it, but the shape of it, how it wrapped around the mockery like agreement. How she didn't say, "That's enough," didn't say, "He's not a joke," didn't say anything that sounded like love. I didn't call her, didn't confront her. I texted and said there was an emergency at work and I had to run. She replied with a heart emoji and, "No worries, babe, love you." I stared at that message until the screen dimmed and went dark. Then I turned off my phone completely. For a long time, I just sat there. Windows fogging, silence pressing in. I thought about the boy I used to be, the one who used to fake being asleep at sleepovers so he didn't have to read aloud. The one who learned to laugh before others could, just to steal the punchline from someone else's cruelty. And I realized I had become that boy again. All this time, I thought I was building a future with someone who saw me. But in that moment, I wasn't her partner. I was a party trick with a time limit. And she had just shown me exactly how long I'd been tolerated. I didn't sleep when I got home. I sat on the edge of my bed, still wearing the same jeans, jacket, and shame from earlier that evening. I stared at the suit hanging on my closet door, the one Lauren had picked out. Slim cut, navy blue, nothing loud. "It suits you," she'd said. "Quiet elegance." Now it just looked like something a groom wears, in a wedding he doesn't belong in. My hands were still shaking, so I grabbed a pen, and I wrote. At first, I didn't know what I was writing, just words, fragments, pieces of thoughts that had been stuck in my throat for months. I wrote about the boutique, about the way her voice changed around her friends. I wrote about feeling like a decorative lamp, pleasant in the corner but never the centerpiece. I wrote, "This isn't love. This is tolerance wrapped in Instagram captions." And then I wrote one sentence that scared me with how true it felt. "I don't think she respects me." That's when something inside me shifted. It wasn't anger, not yet. It was just this sudden, painful clarity. I could go through with the wedding, smile for the cameras, say the vows slow and steady like we rehearsed, and I'd be miserable forever. So I opened my suitcase, the one I used to keep in the back of my closet for emergencies. I packed the basics, a few shirts, jeans, phone charger, my passport. I hid it under the bed just in case I couldn't lie to myself any longer. That night, the wedding didn't end, but in my heart it was already over. I just hadn't said it out loud yet. The rehearsal dinner was 2 days later, held in a rented banquet room at a fancy downtown hotel. Everything looked perfect. White tablecloths, string lights, handwritten place cards with gold ink. Everyone was smiling, buzzing, toasting, and I felt like a corpse dressed in formal wear. Lauren barely looked at me all evening. She was floating from table to table, hugging friends, taking selfies with her bridesmaids, complimenting the wine. And when she did talk to me, it was with a tight, rushed tone, like I was the help. Halfway through dinner, her dad clinked a fork to his glass and stood up to give a toast. He was a tall man with a salesman's voice, always on, always ready to charm. He smiled and said, "To my beautiful daughter, who finally found a man calm enough to balance her fire." The room chuckled. Then he added, "We always said Lauren needed someone steady, not flashy, not too talkative, someone predictable." Laughter again, but louder. Lauren hid her face behind her hands, giggling. I sat frozen, smiling, on autopilot. He raised his glass to me and said, "You're a good man, Lucas, housebroken, trainable." The room roared, and in that moment I felt something shatter in my chest. I looked around and realized these people didn't know me. Not one of them. They didn't know I was funny, or creative, or that I used to write poetry before I got tired of editing every stutter out of my spoken thoughts. To them, I was a story Lauren told, a patient man, a quiet man, a man who would never walk away. She came over and kissed my cheek after, whispering, "Just don't stutter through your vows, babe." And that's when I knew I wasn't showing up tomorrow. The hotel suite was quiet when I got up at 5:30 a.m., the kind of stillness that only happens before a storm. Lauren was already in the bridal suite 2 floors up, getting her hair and makeup done with her bridesmaids. The wedding was scheduled for noon. I was supposed to be downstairs by 9 for photos, but instead I slipped on jeans, a hoodie, and sneakers, grabbed the go bag I'd packed days earlier, and took the service elevator down to the basement garage. My heart was calm. Not because I wasn't scared, but because I was finally choosing myself. The Uber driver asked where I was headed, and I told him, the airport. He made small talk. I nodded along. Inside, I was rehearsing. Not vows, but something else entirely. At gate 14B, I sat in a corner seat and pulled out my phone, opened the camera, hit record. I stared into the lens and said everything I had swallowed for months. "Lauren," I began, slowly, carefully, every word deliberate. "I can't marry you, not because I don't love you, but because I finally realized you don't love me. You love the idea of me. You love that I'm quiet, that I don't argue, that I let you take up all the space." I paused, swallowed hard. "You laughed when they mocked my voice. You didn't defend me, and maybe you never meant to hurt me, but you did, over and over again, and I can't promise myself to someone who only loves the sound of me when I'm silent." Then I ended it with, "This is me taking my voice back. Goodbye." I hit send, turned my phone off, and boarded a one-way flight to Colorado. No more pretending, no more rewrites, no more rehearsals. The wedding wasn't happening. I kept my phone off for 2 full days. No notifications, no buzzing, no guilt bleeding through a screen. Just mountains, pine trees, and the strange peace of being unreachable. I stayed in a small rental cabin in Estes Park. No Wi-Fi, no TV, just a fireplace and a silence that felt like therapy. When I finally powered my phone back on, it lit up like Times Square. 231 missed calls, 147 text messages, a dozen voicemails, and one video from a groomsman I barely knew, but bless his soul for sending it. He had filmed the moment my video played at the altar. Apparently, the officiant was ready to start. The guests were seated. Music was playing. Then the planner announced, "The groom has sent a message." And up on a massive, floral-framed screen, there I was, nervous, composed, refusing to rush my words. You could hear a pin drop. Some people gasped, some cried. One bridesmaid dropped her bouquet. And Lauren. She ran out of the ceremony mid-sob. The groomsman's text read, "Bro, that was the coldest, most badass exit I've ever witnessed. Respect." I laughed, really laughed, for the first time in what felt like months. Because in that moment, I wasn't just the guy who walked away from a wedding. I was the guy who finally stood up, for himself, for his voice, for the boy inside me who always wished he could say something before the joke hit. I didn't feel guilty, not one bit. I felt free. And when you've lived your life trying to be small enough to fit into other people's comfort zones, freedom feels loud in the best possible way. It didn't take long before Lauren turned the whole thing into a spectacle. By the time I got Wi-Fi again, she had already posted a carousel of crying selfies and half-written captions like, "Sometimes people break you with no warning, and still in shock. Please respect our privacy." She painted herself as blindsided, heartbroken. Said I'd vanished on our wedding day without explanation, that she was grieving the loss of the future we planned. The comment section was flooded with sympathy. Some even tagged me. "How could you do this to her?" I said nothing. I wasn't about to play PR cleanup for a woman who mocked me behind closed doors. But the internet has its own sense of justice. Someone posted a TikTok compilation of Lauren laughing at people with speech disorders. Videos from girls' brunches, old stories, even a bachelorette game where one bridesmaid made fun of Saint Stupid vows. Screenshots circulated, clips got shared. Her Pinterest-perfect narrative started to unravel like the hem of a rushed wedding dress. She turned off comments, deleted the crying post, went silent for days. A mutual friend messaged me privately. "I didn't know. I'm so sorry. She's been doing this for years, hasn't she?" Yeah, she had. I wasn't trying to ruin her life, but I wasn't going to lie to protect her reputation either. For once, I didn't have to raise my voice. The truth spoke for itself. And that silence, hers, not mine, was the most satisfying sound I'd ever heard. After everything blew up, I stayed in Colorado longer than planned. Something about the thin air, the snow-capped peaks, and the way the wind sounded like a whisper instead of a scream made it easier to breathe. I didn't answer texts, didn't check my DMs, didn't care what anyone had to say. For once, I wasn't trying to be available, or agreeable, or nice. I was just me. And honestly, I wasn't even sure what that meant anymore. I spent my days hiking trails with names I couldn't pronounce, eating food that didn't care if I ordered slowly, and reading aloud in the cabin at night, just to hear the sound of my voice without shame. Sometimes I'd trip over words, sometimes I wouldn't, but every time I finished the sentence. No one interrupted, no one rushed me, and slowly the tightness in my chest began to loosen. One night I journaled for hours, not about Lauren, but about myself. The kid who stopped raising his hand in class, the teenager who practiced job interviews in the mirror until his throat went raw, the man who thought